on Link TV.
We're so grateful to Ray for taking the time out of his vacation with his family to do this benefit for Mecca. As an act of conscience in 2006, Ray returned the Intelligence Condemnation Medallion given to him when he retired from the CIA for especially meritorious service, explaining, "I do not want to be associated, however remotely, with an agency engaged in torture." Later that year, he made national news by confronting Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld on TV. I would like to do that. And he asked him, "Why did you lie to us and get us into a war that was not necessary and that has caused so many deaths?" Ray has appeared on Charlie Rose, the NewsHour, CNN, and so many more. He is fluent in Russian, German, and Spanish, and he's been married for 50 years and has 5 grandchildren and 5 children and 8 grandchildren. Welcome him, please.
Wow. Thank you. Apparently, one of the things on the web, I guess it's Wikipedia, I guess, has only 6 grandchildren, and I was uprated about that by the 2 youngest when they heard about that. Well, I can't tell you how happy I am to be with you this evening, and someone asked me on the way in, have you found where John Boehner does his tanning salon? And I had to say, no, I was at Concord Naval Weapons Station yesterday so how many of you were there? Okay. What an event, 25 years. And Brian Wilson, is Brian here by any chance? No. Dan Ellsberg and a cast of thousands and a detailed account of what happened that day, told by people who were there, and then told again by people who came there by the hundreds and by the thousands later. The other folks that I hope will be here are my co-passengers on the Audacity of Hope, the U.S. boat to Gaza. Are any of those folks here? A couple, yeah, okay. This was an incredible experience. I've never been with such a group of people, and Alice Walker is just one among many that it was my treat to get to know. Now, again, I want to compliment you all on a Labor Day weekend for making this Hajj to Mecca. I'll try to do a little better than that. I guess I would like to start off with Rachel Corrie, since she's, for some reason, very dear to my heart. I met her parents maybe 10 years ago. We had one of those 4-hour brunches. I had a orange bracelet on, and Craig said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, it's against torture." And I saw he had a green wristband. I said, "What's that?" And he took it off, and it said, Rachel Corrie, and her birth date, and her death date. And he said, "Would you like to have it?" I said, "Do you have others?" And he said, "Yes." I've been wearing this until it breaks. I'm on my 4th one, and this one's stapled together. But it gives me courage. It gives me courage because Rachel is one of those 22, 23-year-olds, just like our friend Bradley Manning, a hero. And when I have this on and I see it, it gives me courage. One of the things that is mentioned in this wonderful, wonderful book, which is a bunch of writings by Rachel put together by her mother and father. In the beginning, they're talking about when she was just a little, it's an introduction here, And it's saying, just a little over 2 years old, about 2.5, Rachel asked her mother, and get this, folks, quote, "Is brave part of growing up?" End quote. That's what we're going to talk about today, folks. Most of us are grown up, and most of us are somewhat brave, but need to be still more brave. These are really interesting times and challenging times, and we have leaders who suffer from CCD. That's a compassion deficit disorder. What's the difference, tell me please, between Paterno and Panetta? What do we think of rulers of our country who look aside when 9 young Afghan boys out collecting firewood are destroyed by air? How about General Petraeus, the divine Petraeus? I call him Petraeus ex machina. Thanks. Do you remember when he said, well, you know, these casualties for children, you know, I think that the Iraqis and the Afghans harm their own children and then show their wounds to other people and blame NATO on those. Now, how many of you are parents? I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine somebody thinking that, much less saying it? He's head of the CIA now, as you know. How about Dr. Alfredi, the phony vaccination doctor who came and tried to get DNA or something from the people nearby where Osama bin Laden was found? What happened there? What happened there, folks, is that thousands of children in Afghanistan and Pakistan are going to die from polio because nobody thought what a scare that would put into people. How people would be so afraid to get vaccinated for fear that something terrible was going to happen to them. Worst of all, of course, this is all being done in our name. And you know, Rabbi Lerner is one of my heroes, and he in turn was taught by Rabbi Heschel, and Heschel made the wonderful statement that is all true. That there's something worse than evil, and that's, anybody remember? Indifference. Indifference. I have to tell you something about one of my granddaughters. She's not the youngest, she's about sort of in the middle. And some of you may remember me saying this because I've been out here a couple of times before, but about 10 years ago, she was watching me on TV. I was on Lehrer, I guess it was, and my wife Rita had just enough time to tell Kathleen, who lives in Oakland, you know, watch Daddy's going to be on Lehrer. So she did with the little 3-year-old, our daughter there. And when it was all finished, my granddaughter went up to Kathleen and said, Mommy, that was Grandpa. And Kathleen said, yeah, that was Grandpa. She said, well, Mommy, that means the other people are real too. Think about it, folks. You know what I'm getting at. If you don't know somebody in the picture, the other people aren't real too. And that's been the case with Iraq, Afghanistan, and God help us, hopefully not Iran. So what we need is people, young people, old people, people whom we can adopt as models like Rachel Corrie and Bradley Manning. We also need to kind of go through some of the things that are happening and expose some of the lies. You know, I take my cue from Martin Luther King Jr., who wrote that incredible letter from the Birmingham City Jail. I use that every time I teach, It's a masterpiece of American literature, I think you'll agree. But one thing he says in that, he's talking about lies and injustice. And he talks about a boil. Now, some of you who remember your adolescence, you may have suffered from boils like I did. When I started in this vein one time, Medea Benjamin said, too much sharing, Ray, too much sharing. But those of you who know what it's like, know how painful it is, know how big they get, and know what has to happen. And what Martin Luther King Jr. said was this: like a boil that must be opened before it can be cured, open to all the pus, with all this pus-flowing ugliness, to the natural medicines of air and light. So too injustice must be uncovered, must be exposed with all the friction and with all the friction that exposure creates to the light of human conscience and to the air of national opinion before it can be cured. And that's what we're all doing. That's what we're trying to do. That's what I see as my life's work right now, trying to spread as much truth around so that we can wake up our fellow citizens and make sure that they have a decent shot at knowing what the hell's going on in this world. Now, I have a slideshow, and the reason I mentioned my granddaughter is because she's now 13, and she put together this PowerPoint presentation for me. And I was just delighted because, you know, I'm still afraid to touch this, but let me give it a shot.
Iran is not working on a nuclear bomb. The source for this information? The Secretary of Defense for the USA and his equivalent in Israel. For their March 2012 meeting, Chapel Hill's Balance and Accuracy in Journalism group hosted an unusual guest. Ray McGovern is a retired CIA analyst who briefs several presidents on matters of foreign intelligence, sometimes directly and in person. But he was surprised by his own government on January 8 of 2012. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta was asked on CBS Face the Nation about Iran. His reply included these words: "Are they trying to develop a nuclear weapon? No."
Now that was on the 8th of January. Now on the 18th of January, and some of you might not know this, his counterpart, Ehud Barak, the Israeli defense minister, in an interview with Israeli Armed Forces Radio, was asked, do you share the opinion of the United States Defense Department and intelligence services that Iran has not yet decided to build a nuclear weapon? Ehud Barak: yes, we do. That's our assessment too. Next question. Well, how soon could they get a nuclear weapon once they decided to make one? Ehud Barak: it doesn't matter, because to do that they would have to kick out the UN inspectors. They haven't kicked out the UN inspectors. When they do, please come back, ask me, and I'll make an educated guess as to how soon they could get a nuclear weapon. Now, those are the official acknowledgments of the state of affairs. You don't get that from the corporate media, do you? You know, the discussion has become, I wonder if Israel's going to attack Iran in a month, or maybe, I wonder when they're going to do it, and if we'll join in. Well, you know, that's a war of aggression. That's something that's specifically outlawed by the UN treaty. All members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Well, hello. So where's the president get off saying, well, all options are on the table, including this illegal thing against international law? Nobody questions him about that. So that's one thing. The other thing is this, that with the focus on this one problem, Iran and its nuclear capability, Israel gets off scot-free on the key issue, which is causing all the trouble in the Middle East, and that is the oppression of all those Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza, the fact that 750,000 Palestinians or driven from their homes back in 1948. The fact that Israel has occupied the occupied territories for longer than the Soviet Union occupied Eastern Europe, folks. A long time.
This raises some questions. If Iran is not working on a nuclear bomb, why the sanctions? Why the threats? And why do some in the Israeli and U.S. governments, and some lobbyists, want a war with Iran? And if they get their war against a huge and powerful country of about 80 million people that borders a waterway for about 20% of the world's oil, how much will this one cost in lives and tax money? Co-sponsors for the event with Balance and Accuracy in Journalism were the Coalition for Peace with Justice, NC Peace Action, and Elders for Peace. I'm Claiborne Clark.
How many of you know that Ehud Barak, the Israeli defense minister, said that? Okay, a couple of you do, yeah. For some reason or other, the text never appeared in the New York Times. And we had to really we had to go through contortions to get the actual text translated from Hebrew. But that's what he said. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And that's the truth, folks. Until they kick out the UN inspectors, all this other stuff is what in the Bronx we used to call a crock, okay? It's a crock. Now let me illustrate for you what happens when somebody talks about it being a crock. Now this is a more recent report, and some of you may have seen it in the Chronicle this morning. So even though we know that Panetta and Ehud Barak have said they're not working on a nuclear weapon, read this Associated Press item here. First, we have a very sinister-looking picture drawn from the files, talking about how Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the same fellow here, he's giving a tour, and Iran's envoys heading for nuclear talks have confidence that the chips are falling their way. Can you imagine? Yeah. Iran's denials that it's trying to develop nuclear weapons carry a distinctly hollow ring. Tell that to Panetta, okay? Israel increasingly weighs the option of a military strike. Blah, 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 blah. Well, that's the example of what you get. And this is what the Associated Press is saying, and it's been all the newspapers. That's where the newspapers get their news now, in quotes from the Associated Press. Look what it says here. Look at the underlined portion there. The United States and some of its allies believe that the Bushehr plant is part of an Iranian attempt to develop nuclear weapons. Iran denies the accusation, saying that the nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. Right, peaceful purposes. So this is the kind of thing you get. The insinuation that, the U.S. and everybody else believes it's for a weapon, but those Ahmadinejad folks, they deny it. They say it's for peaceful purposes. Just to set the record straight here, Condoleezza Rice and Dick Cheney, and even Bobby Gates asked the question, now why, tell me, why would the Iranians need nuclear power? Look at all that oil they've got. Look at that natural gas and all this. Okay, they don't need it. It must be for a weapon, Well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is this, that in 1975, Gerald Ford, when he was president, was asked to approve the sale by Westinghouse and GE of a complete cycle uranium enrichment program for the Iranians under the Shah in those days. Then it was okay. Same kind of deal, okay? Now, Ford said, this doesn't sound like a good idea to me. I mean, hello. But a fellow named Dick Cheney and a fellow named Don Rumsfeld said, no. They need nuclear energy because, they like to get the the hard currency from the sale of oil right now and gas. And as you probably know, Mr. President, oil is a non-replenishable source, so they're looking for the future, so they really need it. So Ford reluctantly agreed. And of course, when the revolution came in '79, the French got out, and so did we, and so Westinghouse and GE were not going to get their $9 billion out of creating just the first ones of these for the Shah. So don't let anybody tell you that Iran doesn't need any nuclear energy, nuclear power, because it has all that oil and gas. We know how they decided that in the mid-'70s, and it's the same today, of course. Now, this is what happens to you. Just 1 minute. This is a 1-minute thing. So this is what happens to you if you...
Well, I'm really excited about a lot of his ideas, especially when it comes to bringing the soldiers home. I've been serving for 10 years now, and all 10 years of those have been during wartime. I'd like to see a little peacetime army, and I think he has the right idea.
Now, you have done 2 tours in Afghanistan. You told me you're going to go back for a third tour. I mean, if you can see your neck right there, what you have on your tattoo, 9/11, remember, and a picture of the Twin Towers. Some Republicans out there have been saying that Ron Paul would be very dangerous for this country because he wants to bring troops like you back from your post from all over the world.
Well, I think it would be even more dangerous to start nitpicking wars with other countries. Someone like Iran, Israel is more than capable of.
All right, we just lost our connection, unfortunately, with Dana. Dana, stand by if you can hear me. We're going to get back. You want to go to Candy Crowley over at Mitt Romney headquarters.
Sorry, we just lost our tech connection. Boy, were they quick, huh? Boy. Nitpicking wars with people like... I think Israel's... That's what you get, folks. That's how bad it is. Now, that was one of the soldiers that was supporting Ron Paul, and that was after the Iowa thing where he did pretty well. And so the CNN people said, here's a GI, 2 tours in Afghanistan already. He's got the Twin Towers on his neck. Man, this is going to be great. But he didn't follow the program, did he? Now, let's see. Here, I have a clip that records a session that I had with Rick Perry in New Hampshire in December, during which I was able to raise a grievance that we on the U.S. boat to Gaza had. Okay, this is only 3.5 minutes, but notice what Rick Perry says at the very end. No matter what, no matter what.
This is about your future. And I promise that I'm not going to let you down. So thank you for being here, and with that, I think we're going to open it up and have some Q&A from the audience. Yes, sir, with a beautiful beard. You get to go first.
I'm Ray McGovern, and I thank you for coming here.
Yes, sir.
Larry. The question pertains to a letter that you wrote to Attorney General Eric Holder on the 28th of June of this year.
Yes, sir.
And I quote, "As governor of one of the largest states, I write to encourage you to aggressively prosecute those on the U.S. boat to Gaza who plan to interfere with Israel's maritime blockade of Gaza."
Yes.
You may not have been aware that 3 days previous, the State Department spokeswoman was asked 3 times whether Israel's blockade of Gaza was legal, and she refused to say that the blockade was legal.
Right.
I was one of those passengers on the U.S. boat to Gaza. Mm-hmm. And with my co-passengers, we're wondering what you, as the governor of Texas, a law and order person,
right,
under what law did you wish to prosecute my co-passengers and me?
Right. The issue was that I am a very strong supporter of Israel. And the blockade of Israel by any type of vessels that they perceive to be trying to go in to do harm to the citizens of Israel, which I think is, from my perspective, there is no doubt that's what's going on.
We're bringing cards and letters to the people of Gaza.
Yes, sir. You got your question. I won't get to answer mine. Thank you, sir. But if cards and letters are how you wanted to get them to Gaza, I would try to, I think there's a better way to get them there than coming in through a flotilla that has clearly been used by those who would do harm to the citizens of Israel. So I get your question and what have you, but the fact is that is Israel's, I think, sovereign right to protect their homeland.
So you make policy for Washington? Washington says no. It's illegal.
Well, here, I made my point. I'm going to stand with Israel. When you have the Palestinian state going around the Oslo Accords and going to the United Nations to try to create a state, then I'm going to stand with Israel. And you're free to go stand with who you want to, sir, and we may stand nose to nose someday, but I will be standing with Israel.
No matter what.
No matter what? No matter what. Israel. Now, that kind of person is the worst enemy of Israel because they don't realize what a precarious situation Israel is now in. The former head of Mossad has said that Israel is in the worst strategic position in its history. Think about it, folks. They've lost Egypt, a reliable ally, because we were paying them off to the south. Now, Egypt has how many people? About 70 million? How many people does Israel have? 6 million, 7 million, okay. How about Turkey? Well, let me show you how Turkey feels about Israel. Now, this happened at Davos, yeah, a couple of years ago, right after the Gaza thing, and Paris, the head of if you could let it run, there's a 24-second commercial here, which you don't really need to see. The background of this was a little panel,
in the joy
which David Ignatius, who is, I think, legitimately called a neocon publicist for the Washington Post, he was moderating this thing, and if by chance he happened to give Peres maybe a half an hour and give Erdogan maybe 12 minutes. And Erdogan didn't like that very much, especially since Peres was defending that incredible assault on Gaza at the end of '08, the beginning of '09. And so Erdogan lost it. I don't know if he lost it. Erdogan stepped up to the plate, and this is what you're going to hear.
There's no time to respond to all of them, but I will just say two things.
Prime Minister, we can't start the debate again, please. We just don't have time.
Excuse me. Sözümü kesmeyin.
Please let me finish.
With apologies, we really do need to get people to dinner.
Sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill. But we are talking about killing. And second point, Gilad Atzamoni says that barbarianism is way beyond what it should be. Then there is the international relations professor from Oxford University, Avi Shalom, has said this.
I want to ask you to refer to our host.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I don't think I will come back to Davos after this. Thank you. Because you don't let me speak. The president spoke for 25 minutes. I have spoken only half of that.
Let me turn this over to our host. Prime Minister,
Ladies,
Professor Schwab.
Now that's righteous anger, folks. You know, some of us are a little afraid of anger. I mean, I grew up in the Bronx, and you know, it's sort of dangerous to be angry. You're allowed to be angry for maybe a day, or if you're Irish, maybe a week, you know. But anger has gotten a bum rap, you know? It really has gotten a bum rap. And I would cite Thomas Aquinas, whom I had to study for too many years than I can remember. When he talked about virtue, he didn't know a lot about other things like women, and he said a lot of very silly things, okay? But about virtue and those kinds of things, he's pretty right on. And he complained bitterly that when he was looking for the Latin word for the virtue of anger, it manat innominata, it remained unnamed. He wanted to write about the virtue of anger, and he couldn't find any Latin word to designate it. So the best he could do was go back to 4th century Christendom and cite John Chrysostom, who said, he or she who can live with injustice without anger sins. Why? Because justice respicit bonum justitiae. Justice looks to the good of, anger looks to the good of justice. And if you can live amid injustice, you are unjust. And it was Thomas's custom to sort of add a corollary from Thomas Aquinas. And so he spoke really strongly against what he called unreasoned patience. Now, think of what that might be. That was the best translation we could do from the Latin. Unreasoned patience. Think about Germany in the 30s, you know. He said, unreasoned patience sows the seeds of vice, nourishes negligence, and encourages not only evil people, but good people to do evil.
Hello, I'm activist Layla Farah, and I want to take this time